Welcome to October. You may or may not be aware that October is National Estate Planning Awareness Month. So who better to have than an expert in the area of estate planning joining us today? She's a legacy lifeguard, actually. Heidi Thompson from Lifeguarding Legacies is going to be joining us to hopefully help us really understand what it is we need to know about the area of estate planning. She's got a really unique background as a former counselor, educator, now attorney. She specializes in what she says is really conflict avoidance, helping families with their wills and trusts. I love how she introduces herself, and Heidi, you'll have to tell me if I get this right. She calls herself a washing, flory, virgie, Texa, Calizonian. 6 states. I'm assuming you've lived life across the country. She's a published author, engaging presenter, talented performer, amazing background for an estate planning attorney to relate to families. She's actually appeared, we might ask you about this, Heidi, in the movie Straight Outta Compton. That's intriguing. And what's really unique is that she is an attorney in the Phoenix area that comes to you. So no traveling, she comes to you. And then she listens so well to what she's hearing about your family situation that she writes it all down. So you literally have nothing to fill in other than reading, agreeing, and signing your name, so that you end learning so much more about law than you knew beforehand, and you truly understand your plan. So Heidi, I cannot thank you enough for being with us today to talk about estate planning and enlightening us on what many people get wrong.
Thank you, Amy. You did a fantastic job. What a great introduction. I'm so humbled. Thank you.
Well, you've done a lot of amazing things. And like I said, your background is very unique. You know, I liken some advisory professions a little bit to like doctors. And we all know some doctors have good bedside manner and some maybe not so much. So yes, anything you can have in the human ability to communicate with other humans realm, which, you know, with your educator, counselor, even acting background, I think is serving you and your families very well.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I do. I enjoy the teaching and the entertainment part that you can do as you're learning what would otherwise be kind of a dark concept. So you might even notice in the background here, there's little pieces of Pirates of the Caribbean with little, in my Zoom background, little snippets. That kind of goes to just explain the way that I might talk about this with you. It's not going to be as much drudgery as you think. So we'll try and do that same goal for today.
Awesome. And you know, when I first met you, one of the things that stuck with me was your ability to use analogies to kind of break it down and simplify, like you said, a very negative connotation topic, let alone legal mumbo jumbo topic. So your three cars lesson was really something I thought that everybody should know about, because it will help them picture a little bit more what this estate planning business really is all about. So if you want to share that with us, I think that'd be a great starting point.
You got it. So imagine that you're car shopping and you have 3 cars on the lot in front of you that you're trying to decide between. One, we're just going to call it the lemon. We don't really know how far it'll go or how far it'll take you, but you know what? It's a bargain basement price of 0. They're just willing to give it to you. Next, you've got a reliable Honda. You know it will get you far, but it may not have some of the bells and whistles that you might like, but you know it would work. And then the third one is the luxury car of your dreams with all the bells and whistles you might want on it. Yes, it'll cost more, but you know it'll get you there. You know that it'll do the things you want it to do. Today, when we talk about what we're going to do with estate plans, I want you to think about those as A, the lemon, B, the Honda, and C, the luxury car. So A, our lemon, that's you don't do anything. It doesn't cost you anything. It is not doing an estate plan at all. Unfortunately, we're going to find about 50% of people never do an estate plan. Closer to 72% don't have one that would work for them now, but with 22% of them having done one at some time, maybe when the kids were little, but it isn't updated. So a good percentage, I mean, almost 3 out of 4 people don't have a plan right now that would work for them. So they're essentially choosing the lemon. So let's talk about what the lemon does. Okay, if you don't have an estate plan, then there's several pieces that you're missing that would have been included in an estate plan. First, let's talk about the ones that happen while you're still alive. Because I know you're thinking estate planning, well, that's about all when I'm dead and gone. No, not really. Part of estate planning is planning for what happens above ground. If you were ever in a time when you couldn't make your own decisions, even if that's temporary or if it's something like dementia later in life where it may be permanent. So when you do an estate plan, you're going to do 4 documents that are really more about. One of them is the healthcare power of attorney. It's appointing the person who will have your legal voice to make medical decisions if you were in an accident. The next one is the HIPAA waiver. This is just like the form you do with the doctors every couple of years where you say, the doctor, you're allowed to share my medical information with these people. They don't get to make your medical decisions for you, but they do get to have that medical information shared. So if you were ever in an accident and dragged to the hospital and they were in the waiting room, they could find out from the doctor what's going on with you. Third is a living will, and that's what happens in those end of life directives. And so it's about, do you want to stay on artificial machines while it's paying out of your estate to do that? And then the fourth one is the financial power of attorney, which is if you can't speak for yourself and pay your own bills, who can do that for you and who can access your accounts on your behalf? So all 4 of those are while you're still alive. And if you are driving the lemon, you have none of them, which means no one has your legal voice. No one can talk to a doctor on your behalf. The state is going to charge your estate while they hook you up to equipment until family tells them to remove you. And no one can access your accounts without going through guardianship for you, which is an expensive proceeding. So it's really, really a bad idea to drive the lemon into incapacity. Now, you're going to think it's odd for an estate planning person to say this, but honestly, what happens at death is less of a problem than incapacity. Okay, if you're driving the lemon past the time of death, what's going to happen is the state rules are going to take over for you. An attorney is going to get involved. They're going to take your estate through probate. Now, if you're in Arizona, that is not the end of the world. Arizona probate is going to be 6 months to a year. It's going to be $2,500 to $5,000 paid from your estate to handle things. And then all of your things are going to go to the people the state says they should go to. Now, if you and I were to sit down and write laws about where we would want things to go to, it'd probably be the same thing the state came up with. It's really not a bad default set of laws. If you're married and all your kids are together, everything goes to your spouse. If you're married and you have a blended family, half goes to your spouse, half goes to your kids. So far, probably about what most people would want. If you're not married and don't have kids, everything goes to your parents. If your parents are gone, then to your siblings. If your siblings are gone, then to your nieces and nephews, then to your aunts and uncles, and so on through the family chain, probably exactly the way that if you and I sat down to write it, we would write it. Here's the problem. We aren't all members of the Brady Bunch. So if it gets to the point of your brother, it might go to the lazy brother you wouldn't have left anything to. You don't have a say at that point, but you're not here to argue about it. So there you go. That's what happens with the lemon. Do I recommend the lemon? No, I don't recommend the lemon. I tell you about the lemon to tell you what happens if you do nothing, and to tell you that really my bigger concern is those life pieces than those pieces about after the fact. All right, which brings us to our more reliable Honda. Okay, let's talk about the Honda. Our Honda is a will-based plan. Now, a will is just exactly what you think a will is. You've seen it on a million TV shows where there's a reading of what people are leaving behind and to who. And it's very much like that. You get to pick who receives your things. A will is also great if you're a young parent to make sure that you have guardianship assigned for your kids, which if you have kids and you don't have a will, please get one now. Put it as your most urgent thing on your checklist today. Because if something were to happen to you, yes, no one is going to love your kids the same way you do, but someone out there could take great care of your kids and raise them the way that you would have wanted. And you don't want them being fought over in court by other people. So do the will, at least for guardianship. So the will does those things. Now, if you do a will package, you'll automatically, with any good attorney, you'll get all of those other pieces we talked about, all the above ground planning. It's a non-negotiable. Everyone that does these is going to give you all of those. So it's included with your estate plan. So you can count on, if something happens and you're in an accident, that someone has your medical voice. You can count on that they can take care of your financials. You can count on that people that you love can talk to a doctor, and you can count on them not hooking at you up to tubes during those last days if that's not what you wanted. So those are covered. And then you also get to decide where your things go. Now, probate, let's talk about that, because you're going to hear a lot of lawyers talk about, to avoid probate, you must have a trust. And there's some truth in that. Okay, a trust by its very nature is meant to hold stuff, and we'll talk about that in a minute, is meant to hold all of your assets. Think of it as a bucket you put everything in. Anything that's in that bucket avoids probate. Okay, but even with a will, you can still avoid probate with some good planning. So it's not the will that avoids probate. The will just says where things would go. The will you can think of as a letter to the probate court telling them where to send things. But your letter will never get to the probate court if you don't have stuff that ends up going to the probate court. So let's talk about what that stuff is. In the state of Arizona, if you have $100,000 of equity in a house, which, you know, if you bought your house last month, you might already have in this crazy market we've had. If you have 100,000 equity in the house, then you need to make sure that your house has a place to go when you die. There's a couple ways to do that. If you bought it with a spouse, you probably have community property right of survivorship. That means your spouse will have your house when you die. If you bought it by yourself, you can do what's called a beneficiary deed. They're a very inexpensive instrument that allows you to pass your house to the person you choose when you die and avoid probate. So we can take that 100,000 out of the equation as long as you do those for every piece of real property you have. The other number you need to know is 75,000, and that's personal property. So that's everything that's not real estate. So that's going to be your bank accounts, your cars, your artwork, your jewelry, everything else you own, all of your savings, all of your investments. The key is for all of those things, we want them to have a place to pass, just like we did for the house. So for your investment accounts, and I know Marie is delighted to talk to her people about these, you'll have a beneficiary on file. In fact, usually when you do retirement planning, you can't set up the account without a beneficiary on file. Having said that, if you set it up a long time ago, it may not be the same beneficiary. So it's a good idea to look at who your beneficiaries are and make sure they're up to date. With your bank accounts at the bank, you can go down to the bank and say, I'd like to put a POD, which is payable on death, or TOD, transfer on death. Different banks use different acronyms. But honestly, if you said, I want to put a beneficiary on my account, they would still know what to do. You're going to fill out a form that puts a beneficiary on all of your bank accounts, and now those can pass to your beneficiaries as well. Even your car in the state of Arizona, you can get a beneficiary form from the Department of Transportation in Arizona. How cool is that? That all you have to do is notarize, staple it to the title with where the car goes, and now it goes to a beneficiary. Easy peasy. So by the time we're done with all of these asset things, all that should be left over is art, jewelry, and furnishings. And as long as those don't total a resale value of over 75,000, you can still get away with a trust and not have to, with a will, and not have to worry about getting a trust and not have to worry about probate. So that pretty much covers the reliable Honda. So knowing that a Honda can do so much in Arizona, and by the way, probate in other states can be horrible. If we were in California or Florida or Illinois, as so many Arizonans have been from these places, I would say don't do a will in those states. If you live in those states, you really do need a trust. Here in Arizona, not so much. Our probate's not as much of a problem. In some other states, it can cost you 12 to 18 months of time and up to 10 to 15% of the whole estate in costs and legal fees. Yeah, exactly. It's a scary thing. Ouch. But Arizona, you know, it's just not that bad here. We really are a pretty senior-friendly state. All right, let's get into the luxury car and why you might want one. Okay, so we've talked about how you can get away with a reliable Honda, but now let's talk about why you might want a luxury car. So let's say your kids are maybe in their 20s. Maybe they're not real responsible with money yet. When you do a will, everything is going to pass to the right people, but it's going to do it as a lump sum. So I call that the pirate's curse. It's like the treasure that, creates more of a problem to have than if you don't have it. And it's just like a lottery ticket winner who 2 years after they bought the ticket is more broke than the day they bought the ticket. It can be a real curse to receive a large sum of money when you don't know how to handle a large sum of money. Now, having said that, if you get a large sum of money as a lump sum and then you go to someone like Marie, they'll help you manage it, and I'm far less worried about it. But if you're going to be that 25-year-old that would rather run out and buy a fancy car and blow a bunch of money treating your friends out to some fun times and not be smart with how to invest and really use that money, if you're worried, parents, that this might be your kid, then the trust is really probably what you want. It allows you to put conditions and distributions over time into the plan. That can be as simple as a third at 25, half at 50, a half at 40, and the rest at 50. Or it can be as complex as I will pay for education that leads to a degree as long as it's in a viable degree that's 2 people approve, and I will pay for a car at 21 up to $20,000, and I will pay up to $50,000 if they want to start a business. And if you can imagine it, we can write it for your children. We can do as clever and a creative thing as we really can. And there's really not a lot of restriction as long as you trust the person who would be administering it for your child. So the key is picking a good trustee. There are professionals that do that. If you don't have the right family member, I can walk you through that part too. But those to me are really good reasons to have a trust. Another fun reason I talk about to have a trust, and I use this as a personal example, I call this my Floozy Clause. No, it's kind of it's not a legal term, by the way. It's totally a Heidi Coin's term. But I tell this story. My husband and I were married at 21 and 23. At the time, we had a ton of college debt, 2 car payments, and we were making $6 and $8 an hour. Now we're in our 50s. Our kids are grown. We've got 2 grandbabies. We've actually built a decent nest egg for ourselves. We've built a small estate for ourselves, something we're pretty proud of. And I love my husband with all of my heart. I can't imagine having a better soulmate partner for my life. We've been married 29 years. It'll be 30 in March. He's awesome, but he's also a very good-looking man. He's got an 8-pack in most of his hair, and he's a pretty good wage earner. And there's no question in my mind that if something were to happen to me, he could attract a woman much younger than me. No question. And now that I put out this video, just don't get in line, okay? My concern is that he could marry this younger woman and become very enamored with her, and she could still want kids, still have kids, and my kids could be pushed to the wayside in that process. You can set up a trust where it has provisions that really do protect your children now while you're in the planning phase, so that that can't be a problem upon remarriage of your spouse. They can't get manipulated into leaving your kids out of the equation. And so that process is what I call the Floozy Clause. You can't do that with a will. With a will, it's these are how my things are going to go. And if I'm the last surviving spouse, most things are going to go under their will, and there's really not much you can do about it. But under a trust, you can. So you can see there's some conditions, there's some creative things, there's some protection for the spouse. And finally, there's also what I call stupidity insurance. Ooh. And this is, I know, see, this is why a luxury car is fun to talk about. And again, not everyone needs it, but it's cool. So as long as your kid is not their own trustee, let's say your 25-year-old kid after you pass is receiving money from your trust, and they get into a fender bender, and they are in Scottsdale, and they get into a fender bender with a Lamborghini. okay? And of course, their car insurance, their little liability policy is not going to cover the damage that was caused in that accident. So they're going to sue. And they're going to realize, oh my gosh, this kid is getting money from an inheritance. Of course, we're going to sue. Except guess what? As long as they're not their own trustee, your trustee can provide for the bill payment for all the things for your child during that period without anything ever touching their accounts that could be attached in a lawsuit. So you protect that inheritance as something for them to live on during a period like that where they might have got themselves in trouble. Same is true for divorce or bankruptcy. So I call that the stupidity insurance policy. And it's just another one of those bells and whistles on the luxury car. So now that you've been introduced to all three cars, the important part is to look at the mileage you have left to put on them, look at what it is you're trying to provide for, and figure out which makes the most sense for you.
And of course, the bottom line question for too many people, I'm one to look at value matching your needs, but then there's dollar signs in everyone's eyes to say, okay, how much is all this going to cost? Will versus trust.
Yeah, that is fair. Will versus trust. I can tell you it's generally going to be double to triple when you work with an attorney to have a trust over a will. I think in the Phoenix area, you're probably going to find your will somewhere between $750 to $2,000 for single or married couple, depending on who you're going to. And you're going to find your trusts between $2,000 to $15,000, depending on who you're going to.
Sure.
With some specialty trusts being even more than that. If you want my exact pricing, it's available on my website, and it's way toward the lower end of those numbers.
Well, and speaking of your website, we always want to let our listeners know, you write blogs, you've written a book called the Lifeguard Your Legacy book, which I found very easy to read, lots of good stories, tidbits, common misunderstandings. So great resource you can find on your website. So best place to find more information and to reach you, please.
Yes, absolutely. So lifeguardinglegacies.com is my website. My website has lots of information right on it, including the ability to download my book for free, including the ability to schedule an appointment. It goes through the process. There's tons of little videos you can watch if you have questions. But also on there, you'll see you can email info@lifeguardinglegacies right from the website. That actually, even though it sounds like info, yeah, it sounds really important, it still comes right to me. So I answer those questions directly. If you get on live chat on the website, that is not directly to me, but they will get you scheduled into an appointment with me pretty easily. I'm also on all the social media. You can find me all over Facebook and a little bit on Instagram and Pinterest and all that fun, LinkedIn, all that fun stuff. So I'm all over the place, and YouTube too, for that matter.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you, Heidi Thompson, enough from Lifeguarding Legacies for joining us today, because this is one of those, I call it the most back burner area of financial planning. We just don't want to think about it, but it is truly a gift to our family to think about and make these decisions now.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It's such a blessing to get to do this with you, Marie. I appreciate it.